Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Come on in and welcome to the Poli Alert Show. Welcome to the Poli Alert Show. We are going to be joined by the governor candidate, Geoff Duncan. Momentarily, we had some issues with them trying to request. Geoff Duncan is on the way. He's running for governor, the great state of Georgia. Come on in. Tell a friend to tell a friend. I'm waving back to you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let everybody know from the great state of Georgia, or if you have family in Georgia, to join this conversation right now. Geoff Duncan, candidate for governor here in Georgia, is coming on to speak with us about this upcoming governor's race and the things that he will do to improve the great state of Georgia that has a $15 billion surplus right now. Actually, I want to know what's going on with that as well. Hey, TKBS, what's poppin'? Welcome to the Poli Alert Show, ladies and gentlemen. All right, there he is. I see you waved at us. I'm going to request you right now. Add as a moderator. Confirm. You added Duncan for Georgia as a moderator. Did you request to go live, guys? There we go. All right. Drum roll, please. There he is.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Yes, we won't let the algorithm stop anything on
I
this
thought I
guy.
was being smart and using my laptop, which would give a better camera image, but instead, the only way it works is with my cell phone. So here we
Listen,
go.
the cell phones possess our lives in ways we never imagined. Computers used to do that, but now it's the cell phone. How you doing?
I'm having a great day. 2.5 weeks till Election Day.
May 19th.
May 19th. Polls close at 7 p.m. Be there.
Be diligent. Stay in line. Let your voice be heard. Geoff, it's a pleasure to meet you. I want to start the conversation off with you were once a Republican and now you're a Democrat. I want you to explain how that happened and why everyone should trust that your intentions are on the right side of history.
Yeah, the question I get asked the most on the campaign trail is like, what was that moment in time where I made the decision, or what was that one issue that just kind of broke my back? And the reality is, it's really been an out loud journey that I've lived for a number of years. I think obviously most folks recognize that I stood up to Donald Trump in 2020, even though I was a Republican at the time. But there's a more prolific journey than that. It started well before then. It was working with Stacey Abrams to pass rural hospital tax credit legislation. It was working with Democrats to pass hate crimes legislation. It was working with Democrats to pass unanimous budgets. It really has been a process, but also living out loud for 6 years of standing up to Trump, but also writing a number of opinion columns about common sense gun legislation that we all know we need to pass, expanding Medicaid because it's literally the only way to fix the healthcare system in Georgia, and repealing the heartbeat bill, not because it's politically correct in all circles, but because it's the right thing to do. It's
Yeah.
literally the right thing to do to give a woman the right to choose, who knows more about her body, knows more about her situation, knows more about her health scenarios than anybody who's sitting in a legislative body is ever going to know. And so
Yeah.
I've been speaking out loud with all that. And so the answer to trust is, a lot of folks on the campaign trail that I meet have seen me on this journey and have recognized it. But also, I think the simple math of it, if I just wanted to be a governor, right? If that was on my bucket list, was to be governor, I would have stayed in the Republican Party. I would have stayed as the Republican lieutenant governor. I would have sat in the front row and watched Trump run his mouth and just bit my tongue like half the other crowd does and been first in line. But the reality was, I didn't want to be a Republican governor with a bad toolkit that couldn't meet the needs of Georgians. I wanted to be a Democratic governor that has this better toolkit that can really reach into the lives and meet 11 million Georgians where they need us to meet them at. Give me
Yeah.
big opportunities.
Yeah. I love that. I feel as though we're in a trick bag all the time in politics. It's like people say one thing, do another thing. I commend you for standing up to Trump first and foremost, because I know you and your family received death threats going up against him. And, it's just where we are in politics. I mean, the disgusting, divisive, racial undertones, the haves and have-nots. I always say on my show that it's going to be the Hunger Games out here in a minute because of the way that, politics is now running. And, I want to know what you see as far as the, economics, the Black economics and small business in Georgia, because that's the lifeline, especially for us here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, 95% of jobs that are created in Georgia are small businesses, right? I've always been a small business owner. And I think there's an opportunity for us in Georgia to take our state government, which is a $38 billion a year operation, and really angle it towards all 11 million Georgians instead of just the few folks or the few million that vote for you. And I think that's an important task that I say in every room I walk into. It's like when you're elected governor, you don't work for just the people that vote for you, you work for everybody. And so, how do you create those tailwinds? And look, part of my story has been my disgust with, yes, Donald Trump's politics and whatnot, but also these MAGA policies and these disingenuous arguments. And my words, maybe not yours, but the outright racist attacks on America.
No,
Right,
my
Donald.
words too.
Okay, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but watching them politicize and demonize DEI in a way that's unwinding a generation or more worth of progress. I mean, even the Supreme Court ruling yesterday,
Yes,
watching dismantling the Voting Rights Act in a way, and then watching Republicans adjust within seconds their vernacular to talk about redistricting and reapportionment. That is all about gerrymandering around racial divides and creating an even bigger wedge. And so I don't wake up having to justify any of that anymore. I don't wake up having to carry those disingenuous tunes. I get to stand up for folks, and I get to look for opportunities to deliver economic opportunities to all communities, not just some communities. I get the opportunity to sit there and talk about improving public education, which is literally, preaching to the choir here, the rising tide that lifts all boats, right? How do we make sure schools are performing at a high level in every community?
yes,
Let's give them the resources that they need. Let's give them the funding that they need. Let's give them the tools and the programs to be successful.
yes. I have a question from the comments. Answer this. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Yes, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, and I said that within minutes of the election, and have not wavered in a moment in time. And here's the thing
How do
that
we, but Jeff, how do we fight that? I mean, we are living in a world where the lie becomes a truth, right? This man has lied so much and has said it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, where he not only shows that if he continues to lie, he's going to be supported, but I mean, I don't know if you believe this. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it's just like it's this last fake attempt on his life. It's like as soon as this happens, it goes right into the rhetoric of this ballroom. How do we fight? And I'm not talking about physically, but how in a political way? How do we fight this when it clearly seems like this man can do whatever he wants?
there's 35, this is my math, right? And this may not be exact math, but this is my back of the napkin math. There's 35% of Republicans that will literally walk off the cliff with Donald Trump, and they're well on their way doing it, right? They're willing to lie, cheat, steal, use their faith to justify dehumanizing people, discriminating against people. Those people, I got nothing for. But the other faction of Republicans, I think every day they're seeing the fallacy in supporting Donald Trump. Whether they're a farmer that's going to lose their farm because of tariffs, whether there's somebody that's in the Hispanic communities or other immigrant communities that are being terrorized by ICE raids, whether there's somebody in their 20s that's trying to afford their first apartment or first house and they can't because of affordability. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on.
Yes, yes,
Look, Donald Trump is the worst decision this country's ever made.
ever.
And I think more and more people are waking up realizing it. That's kind of the area of opportunity for us Democrats right now is this. Yes, we got to win this primary. And yes, we got to win this general election. But I think we got to do it, especially in Georgia, building a bigger coalition than just the base, right? Because to be governor in Georgia, you got to win more than the base. And Democrats have unfortunately found that out for nearly 30 years. Democrats, independents that are now as disgusted as they've ever been, and even disgusted Republicans that are willing to say enough is enough. I can't justify to my kids. I can't justify to my business partners. I can't walk into another church service and carry this guy's water because he's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also too. I have one more question. The FBI recently stole the 2020 Fulton County ballots. Uh, the SCOTUS just gutted the VRA. What will you do as governor to protect the right to vote for all Georgians? This is, the ruling yesterday. All the things that have been set up all this time. Them coming to Georgia, taking those ballots. How do we fight that? How
So
are you going to fight that?
I think it's important to frame what that FBI raid was. It had nothing to do with the 2020 election. It only was to plant seeds of doubt in the upcoming midterms. That's it. We know that. Most folks know that. And that's what that MAGA universe wants, is just nuggets of fake information that they can fan the flames on. I think you got to use the court system. You got to have a governor that's willing and able to stand up and call it what it is. Stand there on that street corner. Call this government, this federal government, out for the lies and overreach and weaponization of every agency inside the federal government, literally. You've seen Governor Newsom, Governor Pritzker, and others that have used the court system effectively, not perfectly, but effectively, whether it be National Guard troops or whether it be using state resources for these ICE raids, not doing that, or whether it be pushing back on the election. I mean, Donald Trump has inserted some pretty big fear. I mean, they're talking about putting ICE agents in polling stations just to create fear and intimidation to try to shape the outcome of the vote. So you
Yeah.
got to have a governor that wants to publicly say out loud, we are better served when more people vote in our elections.
Listen,
We can get spacecrafts to the moon and back in 10 days. We ought to be able to verify if somebody walks through that door of that polling station if they're eligible to vote. If they
yes.
are, give them a ballot.
Yes, and I think you're dead right. And I want to get a little bit more radical, not putting words in your mouth, but when you mentioned Gavin Newsom, it triggered me because I think they're the number one state contributing to the overall economy, budget wise. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know what number we are in Georgia?
I don't know the exact number. I don't know. I know
Okay, but
we're I think in the top 10.
the point is we are a perfect union because each state has a governor that is technically president of that state. I'm speaking in layman's terms. And what I feel from Gavin on a lot of levels, him one threatening because of the amount of money that they pour into, this union. How do we use that to our advantage going forward? Because just like we have a $15 billion surplus, right? We have all these issues, infrastructure, different things going on, but we have $15 billion sitting. Like, how do we use this money against a regime? And I said that using my words, not your words, against a regime like the Trump administration, but then also having the money to really fight it. We have money.
Yeah, I've talked about this every stop, and I've written about this for the last year plus. We have, I refer to it as $17 billion because I think we have 2 billion additional in the lottery. So I think it's 17 billion is kind of the rainy day funds. I've talked about taking 10% of that 1.7 billion and putting it in a jumpstart fund to start wrapping around the axle of poverty, right? Because the federal government they're at war with folks in poverty. And one of the reasons why I sit here as a proud Democrat is because I can no longer sink my faith with demonizing somebody that's in poverty,
It's
right?
inhumane.
It's inhumane. And so I've stood up this idea of a jumpstart fund to better fund the CAPS program, which is a program already in place that allows childcare costs to be covered with scholarship programs. There's so many single parents that just can't go back to work. They want to do the right thing. They want to go back to work. They want to be gainfully employed and provide for their families and create future opportunities. But with childcare costs these days, it's too expensive. We can put $200 million more in that funding into that program. The TANF program, we can better fund and rework the rules of that program. That's for temporary needs. How many people can't pay their power bill for a month or two just because they're between jobs or down on their luck or need a
Many.
ride to work or back? We can better fund that program. Right now, to qualify for TANF, you have to work full time for less than minimum wage to even qualify for the program. Same
Yes.
with affordable housing programs. Same with expanding Medicaid. I want to take literally day one, use governor's discretionary funding, take 1.7 billion out of that bucket. Keep reaching over into this bucket over here. You can't see it. This bucket,
Right. It
and put
exists.
1.7 billion dollars in the Jumpstart Fund. That's a great step in the right direction because we have to remember we do not have friends in the federal government that have the ability to help us with these programs. I mean, look no further than the SNAP funding for kids that need free and reduced lunches at school. It got cut for Donald Trump's billionaire buddies. That's
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
That's not humane.
It's not only wrong, but it's dangerous. When you look at Atlanta, the city in which I have an office in, I live in Cobb County. You know, we have these meetups because these kids don't have anywhere to go, so they end up getting in this trouble or seeming like trouble because they're in the masses. What do we need? I mean, we need this education system fortified in Georgia. We need it around the country because if you look at the 37% of Gen Z that wants to be content creators, right? You don't have these necessary departments at the University of Georgia. You don't have, I mean, they have things in business management and can kind of, align with those dreams and aspirations. But we have to understand it's a new generation, Jeff, and that they're going to have new kinds of education and new things to even have them interested in education. What do we do about that? And I think in this bucket you keep reaching to on your on your left can help with that.
Well, first of all, and I think this is well above party lines. I think even Republicans and all across the state know that we need to reform our funding formula for our public education system. The QBE funding formula is 42 years old, and it doesn't take into account transportation upgrades, technology upgrades, inflation, or doesn't even take into account poverty. Right? It takes more dollars to educate a kid that's stuck in the vicious cycle of poverty in a community or in their own individual situation. So rise above party lines and start to solve that problem. The number of our Department of Corrections builds the number of prison beds. They plan for it based upon the third grade reading levels. We know the problem. Let's go angle our attention at that and
Yes.
making sure that our K through 12 system is a 21st century, uh, 21st century ready for jobs,
Yeah, we need
right?
that kind of model for sure.
I mean, think about this. AI is coming on board. Not everybody's going to get a desk job or an office job anymore. We need to make sure we get back to skill-based training, apprenticeship programs, work with labor groups, work with trades, making sure that maybe a kid can come out of high school and walk into a $50,000 or $60,000 a year job as a welder or a chef or something like that. And maybe they do walk into a technical school, but don't have to rack up $150,000 worth of debt walking into a dead-end job.
Yeah. Speaking of AI, what are you going to do to protect us from that? I mentioned early in our conversation that it's going to be the Hunger Games out here eventually with the way that this administration is moving, and AI is a real problem. I mean, it's a gift and a curse. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the AI model is a lot like what it felt like when I was coming out of college and the internet was kind of coming on board, right? Like you could sense this tension between what we knew and what we didn't know, and it creates economic challenges, it creates employment challenges. I mean, just think about how many jobs are being disrupted right now because of AI. That's a problem. But then there's also jobs being created in different angles and different industries. The data center proliferation has been a challenge too for communities across the state, figuring out how do we build the guardrails around AI and the AI infrastructure, right? There's a lot of communities who don't want a data center for all the obvious reasons. There's some communities that want to embrace them because it's a huge economic tailwind in a rural setting. There's some communities that can't afford to sell 15 million gallons of water a day. And so maybe they need to include closed loop water systems and new
Mm.
technology and solar panels. There's a lot here, but we got to have a state that's willing to embrace it. I think that we need to be the leader in this kind of industry and direction for the world. One of my big ideas when I was lieutenant governor was I wanted Georgia to be the technology capital of the East Coast. I went to Georgia Tech, so I just kind of grew up in the technology world. I've always been a tech investor and entrepreneur, so I've been around the space. But think about the power of being the technology capital of the East Coast. Kids are learning programming in school. They're being able to walk into technical programs and be able to be hardware engineers. They're able to build businesses wrapped around whether it be artificial intelligence or cloud-based systems or software, you name it.
Yeah.
There's a lot we can do to create those high-paying quality jobs that are open to every community out there. That's the type of thinking and planning, but we got to prepare and start in kindergarten.
Yeah, no, we need it. And I also too, I mean, you mentioned Georgia Tech, and I remember when I came here originally in 1992 to go to Morris Brown College. I hadn't seen anything. I mean, I'm from Washington, D.C. originally, and my backdrop was Howard University. But when I got to the AU Center and saw Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Morris Brown, and saw all these amazing minds and creatives. It's not funded or supported through the state. This is one of the biggest clusters of HBCUs in the country. And you're following. You have a lot of Black male support. Can you speak to how you can support historically Black colleges and universities throughout Georgia?
Yeah, I've actually had this conversation with several trustees. Dale Jones is one of them, Dr. Bowman from Morehouse, and figuring out I think there's two parallel tracks that we need to make major improvements. We have 10 HBCUs in Georgia, and then obviously you mentioned the others in Atlanta. I think the two parallel clusters are, one, from a funding standpoint, how do we create more parity with the funding models, whether it be scholarship programs, whether it be resource or facilities or infrastructure? How do we make that state investment in as just cornerstones of our state, not just nationally, but globally recognized for all types of opportunities and intellect and educational tracks? The second parallel track is, what are some of the hurdles that we can remove? What are some of the things we can do legislatively or rule-based that opens up that opportunity to expand funding opportunities for scholarship programs, for individual schools that are wrapped inside of those institutions? Those are the areas of opportunity that I think a governor can stand up for and work with, instead of just ignoring and saying, hey, you go do it all on your own.
Yeah.
There's so much to be learned, but we've got to detach ourselves from any sense that MAGA or Donald Trump are driving any sort of policy making in the state of Georgia. And I think
Yeah.
there's a number of Republicans that would join us on that journey too, because they see the value of the HBCUs. They see the value, whether it be somebody that they've hired or have been hired by, or somebody that they've invested in or invested for. It's just an incredible opportunity for us to continue to grow the
No,
growth.
I agree. And, we have a lot of, and I want to talk race for a second, because when you talk about the HBCUs and you look at McKinsey and what she's been able to donate, you look at like the support, but HBCUs are solely dependent on support from donors and tuition. When you look at the Georgia universities and the Georgia Techs and all the things that are funded by the state, it's just an inadequate, comparison. And, you know, this administration has evoked some of the worst racial tension of any era. And we have to fix that shit. You don't have to curse. I just had to curse and put a button on that, because
I understand.
it is sickening. It is sickening, and it's not doing anything for humanity. And I could care less about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I'm about humanity. And we here at Poli Alert want to give good humans the opportunity to say how they're going to fix one of the biggest problems in our world, not just the United States of America, but in our world. And we have to fix it, because the way that this administration is moving is like they're trying to protect something that will outgrow itself regardless. And they don't need to be acting like that. If we were to go forward as a one human, identity, as far human race, as far as identity here in the States, we'd be further along. How can you help battle that? Because that's a big part of this election cycle.
I think you got to start by leading by example. You got to have a governor that's willing and able to lead by example and call honest balls and strikes. I started this Zoom meeting by saying Donald Trump's outright racist attacks. There's no other way to put that if you're being intellectually honest. And to watch individuals fan the flames of those racial attacks, it's not even undertones.
It's
It's
not
as
even a
obvious.
dog whistle. It's in your face.
It is in your face, and to watch. And that doesn't mean every Republican stands for that. But I want to live for example, or lead by example. I think you start by recognizing this is the home of the civil rights movement. Georgia is literally the home of the civil rights movement. Yet our own airport with Maynard Jackson's name on the side of the building is being withheld tens of millions of dollars only because the city of Atlanta airport wants to use diverse contracting practices. It's wrong. I applaud Mayor Dickens for standing up legally and to joining the lawsuit that's trying to push back on some of this nonsense. Every room I walk into, I talk about leading by example. And as governor, I will have the most diverse cabinet of any governor in the history of Georgia. And I will have the most diverse state government in the history of Georgia. And it's not because I want to check a box. Don't make any mistakes about this. It's because I want to have perspective. because I know the value perspective. I know the value in sitting at a big conference room table like I'm sitting at here and having people from all walks of life, from all communities, from all parts of the state, from all backgrounds that help us solve problems when we talk about big issues like education, public safety, economic development, healthcare, right? That's how we become the state that everybody else wants to be a part of. And to me, that's the hidden story here for me. Yeah, I want to win an election. I'm working my tail off to win this election. But I really want the opportunity to govern. I really want the opportunity to build the example for the rest of the country to follow of how we sit down with Democrats and some Republicans to sit at a table and say, you know what, we're going to put party aside. We're not going to listen to the background noise of Donald Trump. We're actually going to go put 11 million Georgians' best interest at heart when we make this decision and this decision and this decision.
Got it. Anna Banana. I'm sorry, Anna Cabana in the comments is asking Anna Banana. If Trump leaves office, will you go back to the Republican Party during your time in office?
Heavens no. I found a place to call home. Me and my wife talk about it almost every night we leave a Democratic meeting where I'm speaking at. You know, it's interesting. There's two types of politicians. There's those that pick fights and there's those that solve problems. Look, the Republican Party is gone for a generation. There's no doubt about it. I wake up every day able to mesh my faith with my politics better. It's not been perfect. Certainly, it's never, no political party is a perfect place to call home for anybody. But man, I wake up with a smile and I'm ready to go to work every day. I'm a proud Democrat and
Yeah.
I'm staying here.
It's amazing how this Republican administration is using God as a weapon. There's no way around it. You know, they do the egregious things they do, and they try to wrap it around God and as if they're godly individuals, and they are not. That's my words, not your words.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, look, I'll double click on that for a minute. I mean, I think some of the most regretful rhetoric that I've heard in this journey wrapped around Donald Trump has been from the evangelical or faith community that wants to justify Donald Trump's behavior. Look, we're all sinners and we all make mistakes, and I've lost my temper and called somebody a name I probably shouldn't have. But I don't, we shouldn't justify that behavior with our faith. I've told you earlier that this has been a faith journey for me and my wife, and a faith journey that is, I don't roll out a stack of Bible verses or whatnot. I just try to live by example. And
Because God gives us all free will, because you can see why by the way that this president is acting. He gives us free will. He's not monitoring and deleting as this man has been talking and, tweeting on the toilet at 2 a.m. I want to ask you about Medicaid expansion, though. I'm someone who's an entrepreneur. I think my insurance was $2,800 a month for my wife and two sons.
so is mine. I pay $2,800 a month, and I still haven't stopped paying out of pocket, and it's already May.
Yeah, and you and I are roughly the same age, and we might not have, an opportunity to get Social Security the way that the world is going. We might not have Medicaid. What are you going to do to strengthen that for people in Georgia?
So the first step is we auto expand Medicaid. This is one of these issues that I've gotten well versed in, as I've been behind enemy lines on this issue when I was in the Republican Party, and I watched them try to do everything possible but expand Medicaid, and you can't fix the problem. But it's only at one step. It opens up a door and it creates a lower premium base because so many doctors and hospitals have half their patients showing up without health insurance, especially in rural parts of the state. So
Yeah.
if they show up with health care coverage, now there isn't as big a hole to fill. So that should start to lower costs. But
Yes.
we need Democrats and Republicans to rise above these divisions with health care. It is a right for. This is America. Everybody deserves. Nobody should walk into that hospital and have to decide whether or not they deal with their own issues at home or they bankrupt their family
Yeah.
just
And the
because they've
egos.
gotten sick.
Yeah, the egos have possessed the politicians. This is supposed to be a selfless job. This is supposed to be about the people. And I have a question from the people, actually. Black Butterfly Fly 6207. How will you improve infrastructure in Georgia, especially a fast speed train from Atlanta to Savannah or Augusta?
So, on a broader perspective, transportation, unfortunately, at the Capitol has been an R versus D's conversation, right? You see no investments being made in transit, really, no improvements being made to MARTA, no light rail planning that's substantial. the reality is we got to have a 21st century transportation system, one that even includes autonomous vans to get you the first mile and last mile so that folks can be connected to the transit system. But you got to start by investing in it intentionally with the state budget. But we're leaving billions of dollars worth of federal money on the table. So by us investing some, the federal government will invest more. But with regards to that train that goes, and I hear this often, the high-speed train, one, it'd take a while, but we've got to invite the private sector to join us on that journey.
Absolutely.
And
But
I think there's opportunities just,
there's enough billionaires in Georgia that would love to have their name somewhere that would help
and
you.
there's enough billion-dollar industries that would benefit from it too, whether or not be employees, whether or not be have some sort of speedy freight transfer, something. We can ideate around what the best idea is, but having that, there's also another chance to get to Chattanooga that would help alleviate some of the air traffic, right? We've heard that before. Probably some of the airline industry folks are against that idea, but I do. But we got to think above partisan politics if we're going to start to solve even transportation issues.
No, I love it. The real Jill Gates, as governor, can you promise to allocate a portion of the budget to give MARTA a proper operating budget so they can expand like other top 10 cities? Great
Yeah,
question.
yeah, we touched on that. I mean, I think the things that you hear over and over again are the cleanliness of the MARTA system, the feel of safe and security. There's improvements that can be made there, and then you've got to start figuring out ways to expand the network so that you can have more users.
Yeah, for sure. One
I
thing
mean,
before I
just
let you,
think about this: how many companies that have wanted to move to Atlanta or move to Metro Atlanta and haven't because they just sat in too much traffic on their visit, or
yeah.
I live in Forsyth County. If I want to get to downtown Atlanta,
Ooh,
if I want to get to downtown Atlanta between the hours of 6:30 a.m. and 10 a.m., it takes me 2 hours. If I want to get there outside of those hours, it takes me 45 minutes.
yeah, no, that's a struggle. I think before I let you go, there is a disconnection with customer service all across the board in every industry. The way that people could you communicate on the trains and buses, service at restaurants. What are we doing about mental health, man? I think that there's a mindset that it's going to be easy because of these devices and AI, and we're going to figure out other things outside of having to work hard. So twofold: one, how do we address people that aren't engaged in the workforce and get them interested in it? You know, everything that I see from the alerts on social media with all the negative things and people become consumed with, why can't they become consumed with positive things? That's one. And then two, on the mental health side, we need more help in the mental health space. So can you please address those two before we leave?
Yeah, I think everybody has been affected by mental health, whether it be yourself, your close family, your friends, coworkers. We've all seen how damaging a behavioral health, mental health crisis can be to somebody and their family. And so I think we got to start by treating mental health with the same level of importance as we do physical health.
Come
And
on.
that starts by talking to insurance companies and making them create the same opportunities to ensure behavioral health, making sure if somebody needs a therapist, they're able to get access to a therapist. I think we can leverage technology in a way that I think the pandemic took us in a step in the right direction, but we need to finish connecting people with physicians and therapists and therapies. I think that's first and foremost because access to mental health services is paramount, and we're seeing it amplified. Whether it be I've got 3 kids, whether it be through social media, whether it, to your point, talking to even your neighbors has become even at times toxic because of
Yes.
politics. It's almost like there's a permission structure to get boiled up in hatred, and that's just wrong.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. I
that
want to
that's
interject there too. And I think, Jeff, because the simple things matter. When you drive around, you have city owned, state owned billboards. You have things that you could put positive messaging on that if somebody saw it enough, they would start to believe it. They would regurgitate it. They would say it. We see so much train wreck culture that it's becoming very hard, on people. And I just want to encourage you and the rest of the people listening right now, put things positive in the world, especially when you have the opportunity to, like you would as governor.
So one of the analogies I often give is too often society has been made about winning the trophy instead of the journey, right? It's all about winning. It's all about winning that next job, that next election, that next fight, that next Twitter argument, whatever the story is. We've got to get back to making it about the journey, and the journey is what's important. And to me, that's recognizing when things are going off the rails. That's calling out somebody for not doing the right thing, even if they're in the same political party, right? We can't rubber stamp bad ideas just because they're expedient, politically expedient.
Yeah, brother. Before we get out of here, May 19th, you're definitely in it. If you make it to a runoff, because in my heart of hearts, I think it will be a runoff. Why Geoff Duncan?
I think we've got the best chance to win with a coalition of Democrats, independents, and even disgusted Republicans to win not only a primary or a runoff, but to actually win the general election. It's been 30 years since Roy Barnes got sworn in. And I think this coalition is it's ready and willing and able to come in and vote. And then our biggest priority, yes, Democrats got to win this election. If not, Donald Trump will by default be our governor. I mean, we're watching Rick Jackson and Burt Jones's ads play out. Donald Trump will have the keys to the corner.
I can't believe they're actually still using him in ads. It's unbelievable.
But not only do we have a great chance to win and not get us another second place trophy, because the second place trophy, we just spent 30 minutes talking about a bunch of stuff. None of it will get fixed or talked about if we don't win. But the most important part for us Democrats is not just win this election, but when we do, govern well. Make it impossible to vote against us going forward. Make it those families that are worried about their local education system, all of a sudden make it impossible for them to think it's a bad idea to vote for us. That person that's scared about not having health insurance, figure out that solution. Transit, you name it. Let's go govern extremely well. And if we do this right, we won't just lead our state in a better direction. Literally, the whole country will be watching us and seeing what we're doing. We've gotten over 17,000 contributions to our campaign from all 50 states. Because I think folks are realizing if Georgia gets this right, we can too.
Listen, this is my first time talking to you, let alone meeting you. And I'm already in my spirit feeling you're not a hater. You didn't say one bad thing about your opponents. You spoke as if the Democrats have to win, period, which I salute you for. And I would just encourage you, Geoff, to continue to speak truth to power. You already made the first step by leaving a party that is not for the people, not for humanity, my words. But I wish you the best on your journey. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more very soon.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Have a great weekend.
You too, brother. Peace.
Take care.